we focus on helping you claim what's rightfully yours, your health and your freedom. We explore the three main areas of health: the physical realm, the biochemical realm, and the mental and emotional realm. We also explore all the areas of lifestyle we can find that will help you live more abundantly, regardless of where you're starting. And remember, in life, you'll either make excuses or create results. You choose. I'm your host, Dr. Josh Hant, and I'm glad to be with you here today. Make sure to head on down to the show notes and click on the link to join our tribe of human-powered life heroes, where we'll update you on new shows, events, product launches, and so much more. Now, it's time to enjoy the show. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Human Powered Life Podcast. We have a really cool guest today, and it happens that we're actually wearing the same shirt, so there's definitely some kind of, resonance going on here. This is Zack Schreier. He's got a really cool company, a really cool story. We're going to talk about things like intermittent fasting and fat and things like this. Maybe not being fat, but fat in general. So Zack, welcome to the show, brother.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Josh.
Good. So I would love for you to bring people, let's go back in time. I know you're a young guy, an entrepreneur, which is so cool, which I absolutely love. But your health journey has driven a lot of this, right? Driven this entrepreneurship journey at the same time. So bring people back into your story and bring them into the fold of where we are today.
Yeah, sure thing. So I usually like to start my story in sixth grade. I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. And for members of the audience that aren't too familiar with type 1, basically the insulin producing cells in your pancreas come under attack by your own immune system. And that eventually means that you don't have any endogenous ability to produce insulin. So you have to take exogenous insulin in the form of injections or using a pump. And it's basically a regulatory process. You got to maintain homeostasis, in the way that your body used to before diagnosis. So it really invites you to kind of adopt frameworks for thinking about the way in which different things that you do in your life impact the way your blood sugar responds effectively, and then the amount of insulin you need. So I know you're a sort of a frameworks guy, and you like to think about sort of different levels of analysis and levels of places that in the body and mind and environment that kind of impinge on us and generate different outcomes for us. And
Yep.
diabetes was sort of a window into that world for me, very much forced on me, but I'm sort of grateful for the opportunity to, get really involved in this health stuff from a young age.
Cool. So now we're in. So you got into health stuff, type 1 diabetes. When you were young, how did you start to manage or figure out how to manage besides just maybe an injection or a pump? Was there something that you started to figure out in this journey, which led you to where we are today? They go, like there are certain ways maybe I could be able to do this myself, not just rely on a medication.
Yeah, sure thing. So type ones are absolutely insulin dependent because we just don't make any of after a few months of having disease, we don't make any insulin. So that's a requirement, but there's strategies for using insulin and for structuring your consumption in a way that keeps your blood sugar more stable. And so my first order of business was really to keep a really detailed journal. I would record every carb I ate, every blood sugar I had, every single injection I did. I would even record things like sleep. I even found I was trying to diagnose why in the mornings my sugar would rise. So I would record showers and chewing gum and things of that sort. So that was the first order of business, really, just to get a grip on exactly what kinds of effects different lifestyle behaviors had on me.
Cool. And then what were some of the solutions you started to figure out?
Yeah. So, well, pretty early on, I started to run actually, so I was a distance runner, and that was for a handful of reasons. It was in high school, and it was mostly just a social thing at first. But I realized pretty quickly that had a big effect on insulin sensitivity. So, particularly in the hours and days after longer runs and workouts, I would be especially sensitive to insulin. And I found basically if I had a solid level of daily volume, and especially if I included resistance training in the form of like core and lifting and that sort of thing alongside my running, I could keep my insulin levels pretty low for any given level of carbs. So that was an early intervention. The biggest thing I think for type ones, and this is also coming up in the pop culture for regular folks, is that high glycemic foods spike your sugar pretty quickly. And so just to sort of elaborate the circumstance that type ones are under, it's basically like you're flying a plane at 100 feet, and the plane can't hit the ground, but it also incurs damage when it goes too high. And so you really want to keep it pretty level. There's like a really extreme risk profile below you and a more sort of long-term chronic risk profile above you. And this is an analogy to blood sugar.
Yeah.
And every time you have carbs, it's like a big gust of wind pushes the plane up. And insulin, over the course of about 2 hours, pushes the nose of the plane down. And so you're like trying to offset this quick spike with these longer sort of like efforts to stabilize. And so anything you can do to slow the speed of that spike. So whether that's having fewer like high glycemic meals, or having fat and protein and fiber to buffer the absorption of those carbs, or doing exercise before you eat, or potentially actually doing insulin preemptively. So 20 minutes before you have those carbs, you already start to do some insulin. All those things help to keep the nose of the plane pretty level.
All right, that's pretty cool. It's a good analogy for people to think of how it actually impacts. And we see some really cool stuff in my practice. We have interviewed a couple of people that are, diabetic, type 1 diabetic, like researchers. So our tribe is semi-familiar, but I love that analogy. It's a good way to actually think about just trying to stay level, right? And I think that's really cool for most people in all areas of their life. So over the course of this, you get into your entrepreneurial journey, because I know we're going to talk about Lifestacks. We're going to talk about, fat and keto and all of these things. Bring us into this fold. When and how did this start?
Sure. Yeah. So as one of the things that you can do to keep the nose flat is basically to have low carb meals. And so I was eating tons of eggs. That was kind of my snack as a seventh grader and eighth grader. And I was pretty creative in the kitchen. Like I just like to make like interesting little things. And so I found myself like enjoying those flaky pieces of egg white that would coat the pan after we would make an omelet. I don't know if you've used like a nonstick pan and like scrape that stuff off. But I love that. And I was like, okay, this is crunchy and it's low carb, which is like would be a huge boon for diabetics and people that are doing low carb diets, that sort of thing. And so I had it in mind that eventually I might make a product. And I guess long story short, a good friend of mine decided to apply to an incubator at his college with this idea. And he had my permission, and I said I would help him out with the incubator as it went along, and it ended up getting a lot of traction. People were very interested. This was 2018, so the keto wave was kind of cresting, and in terms of like just consumer behavior, and so we were like really well timed, and people encouraged us to just run with it. And so after 6 months of doing that during school, we actually decided to take some time off of college and work on this product. So I spent 1 year basically developing the formulation and scaling up the manufacturing process, and also sort of laying the initial groundwork for some strategy. So we fundraised and we got into some retailers that year. We developed a brand. So that it was a blitz really to go from kind of 0 to 1 in the Peter Thiel parlance. And actually, after 1 year, I decided it was time for me to go back to school. I felt like I had done my sort of contribution to the venture for that phase of my life, at least. Actually, we did have the fortune of going on Shark Tank a couple years after that, so that was a privilege and a great experience. I wouldn't do it again because it's just too much of a liability, really, to be on Shark Tank. But it went well, and we were lucky with the way they responded to the product. And then I guess just to go all the way through the story here. That same year that I was working on Quevos, which is the egg white chip, I started getting into the supplement space. And really the reason for that was I wanted something that was going to boost my performance acutely and support long-term health. So, as a type 1, I have to worry about nutrient intake and just basically all the things I'm doing that support longevity and the things I'm doing that don't support longevity. And, I'm a kid and I have been a kid and I've done, I've had sugar and I've wanted to live my life and I've gotten poor sleep on a few nights and that sort of thing. But I'm generally trying to be very conscious of making an overall positive impact to my body so that I can, live a long time and thrive. And it looked like supplements were an interesting place to basically augment the diet. And in addition to that, there's certain things you can get from supplements that you can't get from the diet. So certain ways of pulling levers and sort of setting mental state, for example, that you're not going to be able to eat foods that support the mind quite in that way. And so that's sort of the origin of Lifestacks. I'm happy to talk more about that if you'd like.
Hey, we're giving you a short break here. where you can head down to the show notes or lifestylelocker.com and join our tribe of human-powered life heroes. You'll be the first to know about new shows, events, product launches, affiliate specials, and more. And now, back to the show. Yeah, when I was like poking through the website after I got some info on you and the company, scrolling around through it, I've, like I mentioned before, I've had like high fat coffee for when you were like 3 years old type of thing. Or I've had it for a long time. I've had it for more than a decade, and I love it. I intermittent fast, and going through this, I'm like, oh, this guy's like talking my language, talking about, using MCT oils, using adaptogens, using things that are going to promote health, nootropics, things like that. So first, let's do a couple things. Let's talk about fasting and how you implement that. Let's talk about the nootropics and adaptogens, what they are, how you use them. And then let's talk about the actual fat, like the MCT oil, how you chose to use a powder form versus, how you showed me the bag before, how you use a powder form versus a liquid form. Are there differences, the benefits, the losses, all of those things? Because I think this is going to really bring people into this fold.
Yeah, absolutely. So fasting first. Basically, if you two things I'll say about this. For me personally as a diabetic, when I'm in my fasting period, it's like there's nothing that's pushing the nose of the plane up, so I don't have to be especially careful to keep the plane flat. It just basically does that automatically. Now, that said, there's always like with a plane, there's lift, and so in the analogy here is our livers are always releasing glycogen into the bloodstream, and so our sugars are effectively always climbing in the absence of insulin. And so we always have a basal rate of insulin that's being released to basically shuttle that glucose into the cells. And that's just basically to sustain energy levels. If that's one of our sort of primary fuel substrates. And so we're always going to be doing something to help to utilize that fuel. But that's when I'm fasting, that's all I need to do. I just need to get my basal rate right, which means I have to just offset that amount of glucose that's being released in the bloodstream just with the right amount of insulin. But it's quite easy because without any of these without any of these carb boluses, there's not that many things that are going to interfere with that sort of smooth like level trajectory. So fasting for me is a huge boon in that way. It gives me basically 16 hours of the day or whatever it happens to be that I just don't have to worry about keeping my sugar stable. For regular folks and for me, I'd say there's a few sort of primary benefits of fasting that we've paid attention to at Lifestacks. One is that Americans tend to be over consuming, not only in terms of calories, but also just the number of hours in the day and the number of meals that they're having. The body's designed to basically have a building and a cleanup system. And in our culture, we're definitely overemphasizing the building and not really reserving enough time for a cleanup. And so this is like specifically like talking about the antagonism between the mTOR and the AMPK pathways. But basically, like, at some points you're going to be building up tissue, and at some points you're going to be breaking down tissue that's suboptimal. And fasting is a great way to let the body do that latter functionality of actually cleaning stuff up. So if you want fresh tissues, basically, and you want to basically slow your rate of aging, both calorie restriction and fasting are very helpful tools. Fasting is also a hormetic stressor, and this is actually related to this idea that we just talked about, but a little more broad actually. So fasting is a challenge in a way, and the body responds to that with resilience. And so it's almost like exercise in that respect. When you exercise, you basically say it's important that we're efficient, that we're resilient, that we can handle stress, that we can metabolize, and then the body responds to that by activating these health defense systems. And so you get stronger and stronger the more you signal to your body that you have to be a strong person. And so fasting is very much like that. It teaches your body, okay, we're not always going to have exogenous fuel substrates. So we're going to have to be efficient at burning the fat we already have on our bodies. So that's a crucial aspect. And then maybe the third piece that's not as often talked about is it's a really convenient consumption structure. We're all trying to do our best in terms of getting the right foods in, and not succumbing to the vices that the modern food system really encourages us to succumb to every day. And the more you have to use willpower to actually execute that lifestyle, the harder it's going to be, and the more you're going to fall off. And so what we love about fasting is in part that it's just a really easy sort of lifestyle to execute. It's a way of keeping calories in check without feeling like you're restricting. So that's at this point, it's my sort of lifestyle of choice because it just works so well for me. And and it feels like it doesn't require much willpower on my end.
Yeah, it's an easy. I always tell people thinking about it is harder than doing it. I've been intermittent fasting, like I said, probably for almost maybe 12, 13, 14 years. And in the beginning, I was like, oh man, I'm in CrossFit, I'm working out all the time. And then I'm like, wait, that's actually not hard. I don't have to think about what I have to eat. I'm like, once you get initially past those first few days of doing this, cravings start to dissipate. And then when you're breaking that fast, or you're supporting the fast, which we'll get into, but when you're breaking that fast with something that's healthy, you're not going to like, all right, give me every freaking thing in the world I need. You're just going to like, I'm good. I'm good. You don't need as many calories, which is kind of crazy when you think about it.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. I think that's a crucial piece of it. People do struggle with the transition to the feeding window, but I think you're right that it's a matter of which choices, which foods you're choosing for that period. The more you're having things that are satiating, the less of a problem that's going to be. So fiber, protein, fat.
Yeah. Very cool. So now let's jump in. I don't know if we should jump straight. Let's jump into the fats first before you get into the nootropics and adaptogens,
Sure, yeah.
like
So
picking the
I guess
fat.
maybe a good lead in here is that there's certain things that you can have during the fasting period that actually don't disrupt those benefits that we were talking about. So things that actually support the AMPK pathway, things that actually continue to suppress appetite, things that help you, potentially things with a slight thermogenic effect like coffee. Um, so yeah, many people choose to consume coffee, for example. Some people can consume electrolytes during more extended fasts, but also during daily fasting. Those are things that you can do to basically just make the lifestyle even easier and support performance while fasting. And so MCT is actually one of these things that we've looked at. So MCT, I'm sure your audience is familiar with medium chain triglycerides. These are typically taken from coconut oil in our case, or sometimes palm. And basically, the medium word in there basically is for the length of the carbon bonds or the carbon chain in the fat. Basically, MCTs are like these relatively shorter chain fatty acids than the longer chain fats that we're having typically. So like something like olive oil is going to be like a C22 or 24. I'm not positive about that, but it's in that range. And then MCTs are going to be like C8, C10, C12, even C6. And just to support the intuition on this, it's basically something that's going to be more readily available as an immediate fuel substrate. And so the presence of MCT is going to let your body shift into a ketonic mode and burn fat for fuel like pretty instantly. It doesn't have to go through the regular digestive process, and so it just becomes available immediately as a fat burning fuel substrate. And so, if you're fasting and you're trying to encourage your body to burn its endogenous fuel, basically, and maybe you're struggling because you're just getting into it and you're a little hungry, or you feel like your energy's dragging or whatever. It could be a great move to just basically nudge the body into the optimal sort of state that you're going for in the fasting period, which is fat burning. So we use FCTs for that purpose. I'm curious if you've got something to add on FCTs as well.
No, I don't think anything to add. So, like, I know your product is a powder, right? You guys, the Lifestacks is a bag, right? We're gonna get what's in it in a minute, but I've never used a powder MCT. I've only used a liquid. That's just me personally. That's what I've started with, and that's where I've been. I've never really kind of went off track. Is there a benefit, or are they similar? Like, what's the difference?
Yeah, there's I say that one of the major differences is that with liquids, people can sometimes get digestive upset, especially if they start with too high a dose.
Hmm.
And powders are a little more gentle. So in our case, our powder is bound to acacia fiber, and so it's basically like it's really actually quite gentle on the gut, and there's no reports of digestive upset with our stuff,
Okay.
as opposed to like the liquid, which
Liquid. Yeah, you OD
yep,
on the liquid a little much, that I won't say too many names, but I've worked and interviewed and talked about people that talk about some of this stuff, and they talk about disaster pants.
yes, yes,
Right. So if
exactly.
you do too much of the caprylic acid, like mine is primarily the C8 molecule. Yeah, if you do too much of that, like you be close to a bathroom. So if you're doing it with the powder, like that's not necessarily going to be the the issue. You're not going to have that same sense. So,
Absolutely.
but cool. All
And
right, good.
there's we chose powder for some other reasons. So maybe I'll if I can approach this from the sort of supplement angle, and then
Yeah.
sneak up on C8 again and C10. Um, so basically we had realized we wanted to use supplements to support daily performance and long-term health, and we thought that unlike certain things that you can ingest that support daily performance, so think of Adderall, for example.
Mm.
Certain supplements can actually fortify your cognitive baseline at the same time that they're making you feel more fluid and sharp. And so I'm thinking of things that are like cholinergic, for example, or adaptogens, or ingredients like taurine or tyrosine. All these things are going to basically build up the brain. You're going to get a performance benefit for that reason, but it's also going to be good for long-term brain health.
Yeah, versus
And
a drug.
so exactly.
Yeah.
So we wanted to basically create a stack of nutraceuticals that would support performance in that way. And the reason a stack rather than just individual ingredients is that unlike Adderall, nootropics tend to be subtle, and that's actually a good thing. Our bodies, bring us back to homeostasis. Like we are this way with our neurology
Hmm.
because like that is what evolution basically selected for us. And anytime we push aggressively against that, it pushes aggressively back. So any sort of drug addiction is going to have this result where whatever system you're playing with is going to become progressively more and more downregulated to the point where you need that thing to get up to baseline.
Yeah.
And
Addicted, right? Just think of that, people. Like you're going to become addicted to something, but your body's not producing what it needs to produce.
exactly. And it's actually interesting, I think, to sort of walk through different neurotransmitter systems and like different sort of reasons that people might crave and end up adopting something that supports those systems. But then in certain cases, how you can have like the sort of seesaw effect where the more you're pushing on one side, the more it's basically pushing back against you. Actually, I'll just mention a book by Dr. Anna Lemke. I think it's called Dopamine Nation, and she talks a lot about this. She's a psychiatrist, I believe, and she has talked a lot with patients that have addiction of all sorts.
Yeah.
And so that was a great read. Really, sort of entertaining or insightful, I should say, maybe, and actually breezy and understandable too.
Cool.
So yeah, basically, so the reason for a stack of nutraceuticals is that we're not pushing really aggressively on any one neurotransmitter system. We want to holistically support brain function, and we think that's a more repeatable, a sustainable way, and a healthy long-term way to basically handle our neurology with exogenous substances like this. And so basically, there's a few different systems that are important here. Um, uh, Predominantly dopamine and choline. So dopamine is going to be basically drive and motivation. It's going to help you like target long-term goals and actually do the behaviors necessary for achieving those. And then choline is more about precision and accuracy and speed. And so nutraceutical combinations for brain health tend to mix those two different sort of precursors to those two different neurotransmitter
Mhm.
systems. And then there's also a tendency to include GABAergic substances. And you can think of this as like one foot on the gas, one foot on the brake, and just to basically smooth out the effect, to make sure that you're not going to have like this overstimulation or anxiety associated with pushing these systems. So we started formulating stacks of these sorts. We were looking at the market, looking at examine.com, reading all the research papers,
Mhm.
and then doing a lot of in-house testing ourselves and just seeing what worked and trying it with friends and family. And we had this insight that people were suspicious of pills, but very open to foods. So we were looking at the market, and there was all sorts of like adaptogenic, foods and mushroom infused stuff, and all this sort of thing. Even energy drinks, like energy drinks, are infused with nootropics of different sorts, but people are just thinking in terms of like a beverage, and they're thinking in
Yep.
terms of caffeine, but not really noticing other things that are included. And so we knew we wanted to infuse a stack of nutraceuticals in a really like healthy, holistically healthy product. We realized also that coffee is also sort of the go-to occasion for your daily nootropic for Americans. Like 70% of Americans have coffee every
Yep.
day. And so basically, it all came together as an add to coffee product with a stack of nutraceuticals. Here, I'll show the badge right here. Um, and when you're adding something to coffee, you want it to be creamy and delicious. And so we chose MCT as that creamy, delicious base. Basically for a handful of reasons. For the flavor and texture effects, of course, but also because we wanted, as I said, we wanted a holistically healthy daily ritual for people to adopt. And MCT was like just the perfect thing for us. Like it's awesome for kickstarting your day, kickstarting your fast, feeling sharp cognitively, controlling appetite. And so it all came together with that full nutraceutical combination on MCT.
Yeah. So I was thinking this as you're saying this. You said you did like in-house testing. So, obviously, I'm imagining you had to be one of those testers.
Of course. Yep.
Yeah. And what did you, it's interesting, always being me personally, also, I test, I don't make products, but I test so many things. And I is an ultra endurance runner and someone that works, full time, I have family, the whole 9 yards. I look how I perform that day, but I also look how I recover. So for me, recovery is as is important as, the performance itself. And I find this was, just the other day, or it's actually yesterday, I had to get up. We're doing some work in our office. I'm upgrading and changing. I had to be up and out of my house at 4:45 in the morning. And I got home last night, had dinner. It was 7:30. My wife, and she's like, "How do you have so much freaking energy still?" I'm like, this is the way I live. I've trained myself to actually function this way. And I may need a little bit longer sleep, 7, 8, 9 hours that day after, but I can repeat the craziness because I'm fueling myself, like you said, with food versus maybe a capsule type of thing, right? So I think that's really, really cool. But I'm sure you had any wild experiences while you were testing stuff. I'm sure people want to know the real deal here.
Oh yeah, sure. We've been cautious. Like we there's so much stuff already out there on the market. So there's thousands of products you can look at with thousands of reviews.
Mhm.
And for us, we weren't trying to like toy with our bodies or brains or anything like that. Like we care about our long term health quite a bit. And everybody that we were encouraging to test the stuff alongside with us, like the idea was like this stuff is all safe and these combinations are found and frequently used already. And so that helped us stay basically in bounds and not have any crazy wild
Okay.
experiences.
All right. Fair
Um,
enough. Fair enough. Did you notice that, did you choose right off the start to do a stack, or you're like, you know what, we're going to use some, Panax ginseng, or we're going to use, taurine or tyrosine, like by themselves, or did you go straight to the stack?
Definitely experimented with every individual input myself over the course of actually a few years before we actually started formulating like stack products that we intended to like market in this way. So like I wanted to get my it's generally recommended in the nutraceutical space for like biohackers to like start with individual ingredients so they can see what's working for them. Um, Now that said, most people don't have the patience to test like 1,000 different things on the market and
Of
see what
course.
and so, when we're mass marketing a product, we think, basically we can do the in-house testing ourselves, make sure that basically the response profile is such that as many people as possible are getting benefits, and as few people as possible are having any sort of drawbacks. And if we can develop a stack like that, then we feel like, it's not actually important for my parents to go and test taurine and tyrosine and
Yeah,
ginseng
of
on
course.
their
Of
own.
course.
So, but yeah, for me, I've definitely had experience with all these
Yeah.
compounds individually.
Yeah. And so like let's just go right into the life stacks. I know you mentioned on the website you recommend having it with coffee. And we said 70% of the US drinks that coffee. So for that 30%, I know you can mix with water. Has anybody tested it? I'm just thinking like vanilla chocolate, like the flavors. Like, has anybody tested it with like a tea? Is it
Yeah,
weird?
actually, yeah. I say if you're gonna do a tea, go with vanilla. That's what my experience so far. It would depend
Okay.
on the tea also, but I've been surprised by the range of things people have tried it with. We had somebody that was taking it with orange juice, which I found. I wasn't even willing to really taste that, but
Yeah.
he said he was so excited about the effects that he was experiencing that he just wanted to put it in anything he could. And he wasn't a coffee drinker, so he went that route. The most common thing besides coffee is actually smoothies. So people will add it to like their daily smoothie, pretty
Okay.
typically.
Okay, cool. And but you would recommend ultimately you want this early in the day with the coffee or water or something like that or tea to help promote so you're not throwing extra calories into your system to break that, that fasting state, right? Where all of those benefits are happening.
Yeah, we basically encourage it for use during the fasting period. It's 45 calories in total from MCT and also from that acacia fiber I mentioned, and from nowhere else. Maybe our flavor blend in total is bringing five calories, and those are actually fibrous as well. And so yeah, basically, these are fasting supporting calories, and so basically we feel like why break your fast first in the morning with your cup of coffee if you don't have to? Like you can add coffee mate to your coffee if you want, but then you've just basically compromised your fasting period, which you basically slept for 8 hours to start earning. And so, yeah, we definitely view this as a fasting friendly, like during the fast option. And as you said, morning is best, or, at the latest, like early afternoon. And the reason is it does create a sustained energy effect. So really every ingredient in the formulation has a subtle effect on raising cognitive baseline and energy levels. And so like if you were to take it too close to bed, then you might have trouble sleeping.
Very, very cool. We're going to get into that in the second phase. We're going to get to like taking this maybe at nighttime for certain reasons, and we'll dive there in a bit when we get to the video only portion. So what I would love for you to do now, just share the best place for people to find your products, but also maybe if they want to connect with you.
Sure. Yeah. So you mentioned our website a few times, and that's lifestacks.com, spelled how it sounds. Stacks is stacks. I'll say stacks are just supplement combinations in our space. But also there's it's an allusion to habit stacking as well. So people put together, multiple habits, like basically attaching a new habit they desire to an old habit that they're already doing. And that's a way to drive adoption. And so like, MCT with your coffee. And then there's also this idea of your daily habit stack. So the set of things you're doing to support long-term health. And
Cool.
so we view ourselves as plugging into your daily habit stack, hopefully in a very helpful and supportive way. So yeah, you can go to lifestacks.com and find us there. Also on Amazon, if that's your preferred place to shop. And we just launched. So maybe by the time this airs, we'll have some reviews, but like literally we just launched 2 days ago. So, it's, but we're seeing some significant traffic already, which is really fun. And actually I'd potentially encourage people to go to Amazon and even search us if they really want to be supportive, like MCT oil powder, and click on Lifestacks, and that will like show the Amazon algorithm that we're a desirable and search
Cool.
product.
Yeah. Let's help our tribe here, people.
Yeah, thank you. And then in terms of reaching me, best place is Zack, ZCK, at lifestacks.com, and just send me an email. I'm not really on social myself, but I respond to email. So
Cool. All right, everybody. Make sure you check those out. I think you'll actually love, trying your intermittent fasting, getting the Lifestacks. If you've never used MCT oil in coffee, if you've never used an adaptogen or nootropics, be prepared for some pretty cool stuff. Talk about like focus and energy. I've done it all, and I do it on a regular basis. It's freaking awesome. So I hope all of you get to do this. And the cool thing here is you can do it in a scoop. Your coffee, right? You don't have to have a shelf full of all of these supplements to stack in, if you will. So this may be a great way to, and use the word biohack your way into this biohacking world and improve performance. So Zack, this has been a lot of fun. You got a little brain on your head there, man. I'm impressed. And you definitely studied your science too. So I think the tribe definitely is, going to have to start, looking up some of the words you may have used, but I think that's good. We want to encourage, people using their brains as well. So appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Josh.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Human Powered Life podcast. Make sure to head over to lifestylelocker.com to check out all the details on the show and to watch part 2 of this episode, which is only in video format. We also have this audio portion in video format if you want. Once again, I'm your host, Dr. Josh Hant, for the Human Powered Life podcast, and I'm looking forward to staying connected with you as a Human Powered Life hero. Remember to join the tribe, and we'll see you soon. Bye-bye.